Question and answer. Nothing.
Oh, it's a good question.
Wait, are you doing it once every month?
That's cool.
I mean, you don't want to do it, I would give it, because that's not very. So, I don't know what the stuff was. Yeah. Finance, yeah, I don't know,
Yeah, what's a great job on the work.
Yeah, those meetings are very like, I would rather do my cubicle coffee today.
I don't want to be there.
But I was happy to.
Yeah, tomorrow meeting was. Burning up.
So you, well, it's 10:08, so if you want to keep. How do you do the clicking? How do?
Come on. There you go.
Oh, wait, do you just have to click the actual?
You can use these two, just or hit enter.
Oh,
It should work. It was like in the Zoom and it wasn't.
Are you gonna talk first?
I got that, yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started with session 2. So, this session is primarily focused on UTREX. And last year we did something a little different where we had what we called a basic UTREX training. So a lot of it is not new information. However, we got a lot of positive feedback from both new people in your positions as well as seasoned people that it was really helpful to go over this type of stuff. And so we're doing it again. And then we will have training on data gateway. And then lastly, we'll have Katie, our data privacy person from USBE, do a review on that. All right, and so I'm going to turn the time over to Riley. She is the newest member of Data and Statistics, and she's going to be jumping right in talking about some UTREX information.
Alrighty, hello everyone. Like Calista said, I'm Riley Finnegan. I joined the data and statistics team in August and have enjoyed interacting with some of y'all during the data review period. So it's nice to see some of all in person today. So I'll be again going over really basic information with UTREX and also the data gateway, but the only part of the data gateway that I'll be going over is that is what you use to access the UTREX overview screen. So in case no one is or someone hasn't been able to figure out how to get to the UTREX overview screen, the way that you do that is by logging into Data Gateway, which is at datagateway.schools.utah.gov. You click on the UTREX tab and then you click on UTREX overview. And if you're not able to access that, then there's probably some issue with permissions, which Erin might be talking about later, but we can help you get that sorted out. This is an example of what the UTREX overview screen will look like. Of course, it will be for your LEA, but just some of the key features that are on the screen that are helpful for you are some processing and submission timestamps. So one of the most helpful things to see is this one right here near the top that's bold. It will let you know when your last submission was submitted and processed, if it got processed. And so if there's any, if the date doesn't match when you submitted it, then there might be a problem. There's some other timestamps as well that are a bit more detailed, but that bold one is really helpful. There's also validation error reports, and so that's in the top right corner. If you click on that Excel icon, that will download all your validation error reports. We also have them broken up by level 1 and the fatals and the warnings as well. So you can click on each one of those to download a Excel spreadsheet individually, or in that top right corner, you can download all of them together. Also highlighted is the examine data file, which is really helpful for understanding the data that you've submitted that has been collected and whether or not it has gone through. So you can see if the record has gone through or if it won't be getting through. And then finally, there is the finalized data box, which is really helpful. That is where you go to see when you have finalized your data, and also that's where you go to when you need to finalize data during a finalization window. This will be just included in the PowerPoint that we send out. So that's just what I talked about. And so I talked a little bit about the validation errors that you can find on the UTREX overview. So a little bit about them. There are fatal errors and there are warnings. Fatal errors will block a record from getting into UTREX and they must be fixed. There are ramifications for if there are fatal errors on certain records. So for instance, if there's a fatal error on a student record and that student's not getting into UTREX, there's probably not going to be any funding showing up for that student. There are some warnings that will turn fatal at a certain date, usually the last day of the school year and of school, and it must be fixed before that date or it will go fatal. And here's a list of these warnings that are ones that turn fatal. And there's also, most of the warnings will only ever be warnings. You just need to ensure that the data that you've submitted are accurate. And if they are, then you're free to ignore the warnings. Unfortunately, we can't make those little orange numbers go away. They're going to be there, but rest assured that if the data are accurate, that it's okay. You can ignore those warnings. There's also two different levels of the warnings and errors. Level 1, errors and warnings are those that are occurring within your LEA. So for example, you could have a student who's missing a reading on grade level status. If they're a 1st through 3rd grade student at the end of the school year, they've been enrolled for at least 20 days, this error is going to trigger on a student. There's level 2 warnings and errors, and those are due to data that are being submitted or that involve at least one other LEA in the state. And so, for example, you could have a dual scram warning that shows up because one of your students has an active scram record in your LEA, and they also at the same time have an active scram record in another LEA. So to access your validation error reports, you click on the top right corner of the UTREX overview screen, the validation error button, and that will download all the validation, all the fatal errors and validation warnings. If you want to see them broken out in levels and fatals versus warnings, you can click on each one of the individual icons and you'll get one spreadsheet for each, or you can, again, just download all of them at once. Level 1 validations are on the tabs at the bottom of the spreadsheet, and they correspond to the record type, and the validation number or the error code /ID corresponds to the record type. So for instance, like district or school or student. And then level 2 validations are on the level 2 errors tab that is at the end of the spreadsheet. And the first few columns will give you the validation error information. And if you scroll all the way to the right, you'll see a column called Other LEA Name. And that information is providing the LEA that is triggering the error that is on this level 2 validation. There's also a really helpful column in the examine data file, which I'll go into soon, about how to access that. And if you scroll towards the right on the examine data file, there's a column called is valid, and that will indicate if the record is going to get into UTREX, or if it's getting into UTREX. If there's a 1 in the cell, that means that that record is valid and it's passed level 1 validations, it's gotten into UTREX. A 0 means that that record is going to be blocked by a fatal error that is on the record. A 2 also means that that record is going to be blocked getting into UTREX, but that's being blocked by a fatal error that's on a higher level record. What is a higher level record, you ask? There is a hierarchy of records for UTREX. So like building blocks, the base blocks must get into UTREX in order for higher level records to get in. And so, for instance, if you have a district record that has a fatal, then all the other records on top of it, the school, the student, none of those records are going to be able to get in. If a school has a fatal, then all the records above that will not be able to get in, but the district record will still get in. So if a student record, either a S1 or a student list record has a fatal, then all the other transcripts above it, or all the other records above it, like transcripts or course, or incident data, will be blocked. Some other details: I1 or incident records block I2 incident association records. AC course records can block AM membership records. Student transcript records can block other transcript records, and then S2, SCRAM, S3, YC, and THS for 1% records do not block other records. So for example, if you have a SCRAM record, that could be blocked by a fatal that's on the SCRAM record itself, or on the student record, or on the district record, or on the school record. So I talked a little bit about the examine data file. This is helpful for understanding, again, what data is being submitted to the collector, if things are valid, what you've submitted. A lot of the questions that you might have can be answered by downloading and looking through this file. And the way that you access this is by, again, accessing or going to the UTREX overview screen, clicking on the Excel file icon next to the words that say examine data. And the tabs that are in the file will match the record types in the UTREX specifications. So for example, the incident record data and the incident association data each have their own tab. And if you don't see either of those tabs, that means that no incident data is getting into UTREX. And there's one exception, and that's on the student record, which has some information on the student tab and some on the student list tab. And as usual, we encourage you, and please ask that you review the UTREX specifications and to learn more about the fields for each of the tabs. All right, so we've got about 5 minutes left for me, so we can practice right now. Everyone online, everyone in person, if you'd like to, let's practice using the examine data file. So you're going to log into Data Gateway, and I think if you have any questions, people are able to come around and help from our team. So yeah, datagateway.schools.utah.gov, log in, find the examine file, download it, scroll through the tabs, check them out, find the is valid column, and also if you're lost and confused, let us know.
If you're looking at it, it's like, I've done this 100 billion times.
Don't do it.
And if people are online and need help, feel free to put something in the chat.
Yeah, this is basic
Very.
training. What basic training? If you guys want different types of training in the future, volunteer. Paul?
Well, and I will say, while it's basic, the majority of the questions that we get during a submission period relate and can be answered to using the examine data file or the validation error file. So it is basic, but it's really important when you need that student in UTREX at a really crucial time during the year. So that's why we go over it, because there's so many questions that we get emails and calls about that can be answered using.
Okay, you broke this system. Thanks, guys. Cliff, they broke your
Congratulations.
I will log in. Usually we'll never do that. Yeah, well, you can say about that. There's like we know what to do.
Being cloud-based,
Yes.
scaling it, and that kind of thing, yeah.
It's data gateway.
It just.
All right, we tried.
People are
That's about it.
Mine is down. Okay, so we got one person. Two. You got a couple of people got it.
And the file, it is normal for the file to take a few minutes or longer, especially for big districts to download. That's pretty typical. A charter might be a faster download, but big districts do take longer to download those files. For those that are having login issues with Data Gateway, you can keep this as a to-do item for sometime after the meeting and just make sure that before year end sometime, you know how to use the examine data file. We'll send out these slides with the instructions as well. For those that are able to get it right now, then go ahead and keep going with it. Malia did make an important comment that the USBE website's going through a migration process right now, so that might be the issue.
They're coming right now.
I thought you were just doing phone migration. You're doing website migration. Because it should just be the phone. system.
Some of my team, they're beginning to, somebody tell me what's specifically happening for you guys. For me, I'm getting spinning wheel. But some of my team members.
We're not from the.
It just says that there's 13 maintenance. So they'll be right now.
Well, we
That's
have.
probably our DevOps team.
You don't need to be blind. Like, no one's gonna go.
There's at least 80 people online.
Okay, well,
So.
we will send this slide out. The point is to make sure that you're familiar with it, you know what the examine data file is, and then if you have questions prior to year end on using it, please reach out to us because that's something that's really important to know how to use. We will move on and we apologize for the technical difficulties, but we all know that they do happen. So I'll continue with our review of UTREX by going over some important reports. So there are several links to get to the reports page in UTREX. So once you're logged in, again, assuming that your account is not deleted, you have a valid password, and that you have the correct role assigned, you should be able to log in and you would see a UTREX dropdown. From there, you can click on reports. You can also get there from the overview screen by clicking on reports that way. So some important reports. Oh, one note I wanted to talk about before talking about the other reports was there is and has been in the past a link on the finalized box that says reports for finalized data. That link has never worked properly. And so it should be disabled at this point, but when you're in a like October, December year end and you want to download your year end or your final reports at that submission, don't use that link from the overview box. You'd want to go into the actual reports under December, under year end or under October and just download each one. So again, this specific link is on the finalized box and it doesn't work. Here is what I'm talking about. This is where you do want to go. So once you're in the reports under UTREX, you'll see the different submission periods. So if you were finalizing come July, you would just want to make sure that you download each of those 4 reports. And then the same thing at October and December. We also have other reports. So year round, you can see on the right-hand side, those reports are available at all times during the year. They are helpful during certain submission periods. So like graduation would be important to review both in July and October, but it is under year round. Similar incident data is important at all times during the year, but at year end is when we want you to specifically be reviewing that. Okay, I already talked about the 3 different submission period reports. But I will point out that they are customized to use business rules and show data that is relevant for that period. The data is live, which some of our reports are not live. So that means that they're pointing to each daily UTREX submission that you do. The archived reports will reflect the data that was in the finalized data set for each submission period. But as many of you probably know, those are not always available right when you finalize. So, oh, we have a comment?
Just wanted to let you know that UTREX should be back up for everybody if you want to try again. I'm in.
Data gateway.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, for those that didn't hear, Cliff said that Data Gateway should be back up if you wanted to try logging in now. So again, the archived reports, we encourage you to use those when needed, but you shouldn't solely rely on those, especially when it comes to an audit, just because depending on the time that the auditor comes in, and if those reports are not available, it's always the best case scenario that you have your own record. And that means when you finalize, you download all the October reports or all the year end, whatever period is, and save them to your computer. If for some reason you don't do that, then the archived reports are there for you to use. But again, it's not always timely. Okay, and then we talked about the year-round reports. One note, this is less than ideal, but the graduation reports under year-round, those have not been for at least the last 4 years based on live data, meaning that they're only up to date as far as the last submission period. So October, December, and year end. Okay. One thing that, oh, yes, question?
So for that graduation rate data. So for the graduation rate data that isn't updated until year end, is that after the finalize is submitted, or is that sometime in June prior to when we're doing our finalization?
No, it's after the finalized time. So that will be usually mid to end of July. All right. One note, when Riley was going through some of the files that she talked about, and then with a lot of our other data gateway reports, if you ever see multiple icons, so PDF or CSV, sometimes Excel, those do have a meaning that's important to know if you don't already know this, but PDF is aggregate. So if you download your school summary report and you do the PDF version, it's going to have your aggregate counts at the school level and LEA level. For districts, you just always want to make sure that you're looking at the very last page. Otherwise, you're only going to see that particular school. Now, the CSV or the Excel option, those will give you student level. So it's really useful, like when you're in October or year end and you're trying to get your counts right. Instead of just looking at, the count 500 in this school, if you download the student level file, you can actually see the row with the student identifier and every single field that's being submitted for that student. So that's a really important thing to note on some of our reports. If they have the PDF for CSV option, sometimes using that student level is really useful when you're trying to research a problem. Yes.
Online question. What is the best report to reference for graduation data to look at current grads / dropouts if the graduation cohort report is not live?
So it depends on which time of year you're looking at it. If you were to look at the far right year-end graduation report, I believe before we run the cohort, there's 3 future cohorts that show up, and that will be up to date as of December right now in this point of the year. But then if we pass July, it sort of depends. We also send out Move It files twice a year, and then the preview report will be updated. And so it depends at what point in the year you're looking at it. But if you have specific questions about that, you can reach out to me or David after the meeting, and we're happy to help you with all things related to graduation data. Okay, so we talked about the PDFs and CSVs. Okay, so lastly, I was gonna go over our UTREC submissions and then courtesy data reviews. So a lot of this is review, and I probably won't read every bullet on these slides. They will be sent out, but just as a reminder, all LEAs should be collecting data daily in their SIS and submitting daily from your SIS to UTREX, which is the state system. And that is in board rule. We don't just explain this to be mean or to make everyone comply with these rules. There is a purpose, and that's because collecting and submitting data daily, I mean, there's lots of reasons. So UTREX is a dump and load system, meaning that every time you submit a new collection, the old data goes away. And so because of that, if you had a day where you submitted, and this happens to everyone, there's technical issues, or you all of a sudden have 300 fatal errors, that submission becomes a little bit problematic. You might be missing students, you might have bad data. So the next time you submit and that gets cleaned up, now your submission is good and you have good data. So the reports that rely on live data, it's really important that you're submitting daily. That way we capture the most up-to-date and clean data. And that happens on a daily basis. The other reason is because we'll periodically pull data using UTREX and not one of the like snapshots in time from December, October, year end. And if we need accurate, up-to-date data from that point in the year, it's really important that we have that in UTREX on the day that we pull it. And then for you and for ourselves and for IT, it's just easier when we're maintaining the data throughout the year rather than, you know, come July and we're trying to clean up thousands of errors and warnings. It's way easier to maintain and for you guys to get help from us when we're doing it more frequently. Okay, and then as you know, or if you don't know, this is really important. In bold, we have our 3 times a year that the data is required to be finalized. That's something that the LEA has to do for themselves because it's your official stamp of approval that that data is accurate. We can never push that button or finalize your data for you. And those 3 deadlines right now are all set on the 7th, October 7th, December 7th, and July 7th by 5 p.m. Sometimes if those dates fall on a weekend or a holiday, it will be the following business day. We did have a past data meeting where we talked about potentially changing the July date, but as of right now, it is still the 7th. And so until you hear otherwise, just plan on that. And it definitely would not change in this upcoming July. So mark your calendars now for everyone that needs to finalize or works with data in your LEAs. That week and weeks leading up to the actual date can be really critical for the personnel to actually be available and not out for summer break. Yes.
Want to ask a question, Paula, it's not working, there it is. Can I submit before July 7th?
Yes.
How soon before July 7th? Before I go on vacation, can I submit? Finalize?
So it depends on the date that the finalizer is available, but the last bullet point on this slide, you'll notice it's usually open a week or so in advance of the deadline. That's true for October and December. Year end, we usually try to give you 2 weeks. So from July 7th, it would be 2 weeks prior to that you would have that window to press the button.
Is there any reason why that couldn't be opened earlier?
Cliff, do you have any insight on? I know for our team, the answer to that, but.
Yeah. Currently, we're doing the 1 week, but I'm absolutely open to opening it up to 2 weeks. I would prefer people start working on it as soon as possible rather than waiting until the last minute. So if people are in favor of that, we can take that back to the table and get back to it. We can open that up early.
So the discussion for those who are online, if they could hear or not. Is there any reason we couldn't open it up earlier? Cliff says, give me feedback.
Just for the year end, mostly, like, we're usually hard pressed to get the other data, you know. For year end, a lot of us. I know it takes time to prepare the year end data, but.
So you want to open on June 1st? Trying out feedback.
No, I don't want to change the required.
No, we're not talking required time. There's something online too. 2 weeks would be great. That's what they said online.
Well, and for July, usually that's the goal, 2 weeks.
2 weeks. I'm just bringing.
Earlier than that becomes difficult, at least for our team. The IT team might have a different, they might be able to make that button available. But for us, we have a series of training, courtesy data review processes to help you guys get your data ready. So that's why for us, that window sort of becomes a little more crunched. But if the button was available, I mean, you certainly could press it when you were ready without the training data review. Yes.
There's a question online that says, do we have to wait until you evaluate our data?
So we'll talk about that in a second. I mean, the answer is ultimately no. You can, if the finalize button's available, you can press it whenever you want. But do we recommend that? No. I mean, we would recommend that you thoroughly review your data on your own in conjunction with using the review that we do. But you can finalize, it's your data. You do not have to wait for us. Yes.
Just a comment. If you're done and you're happy with your data on June 5th.
Mhm.
You're done and happy with your data on June 5th, you can just turn off your collector. And then what you submitted on June 5th stays there until the finalizer opens, then you can hit the finalize button then. It's not like you have to keep sending data every day that may suddenly get broken from what you were happy with on the 5th. Unless Cliff is gonna correct me if I'm wrong. Okay.
I'm more than happy if you can get it done by the 5th. You know, that's optimal for everybody. I will say though, if you're gonna turn your collector off, that is something that I've taken on as a daily responsibility to go out and watch. So every day that somebody doesn't give a collection, I'm gonna show that later here, that we actually are tracking that internally and looking to even bring that out externally for each of the LEAs to be able to see.
Is there any, I guess, Cliff, is there any technical reason why Utrex couldn't have the finalized button available sooner?
You can keep refinalizing as many times as needed. So potentially during the window, you could put it in on the 5th and then you could find out on 7th, oh crap, I missed somebody. and go back, refinalize again on the 7th, and you're just fine. So
Right,
we
but
don't have
meaning,
a technical problem, like we don't have a window. I control that window, it's very easy for me to turn that window on.
okay,
It's really just making sure that it's, the people who are pushing it are ready for it to be pushed for that data to be ready.
okay. So that's maybe an internal discussion that we can take back, opening that window to be longer, earlier.
I just wanted to say, the earlier you get your data in, the cleaner it is, the sooner that the USBE team process that data, and you will get your rollover year faster, be able to roll over the new school year. But if there's even one LEA that hasn't finalized, come July 7th till 5 o'clock, we're all in limbo. So that's one of the issues. And Trish just brought up that when they finalize, and maybe some of the other schools wait to finalize, it can change their data, so they have to go fix it.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
That
so
does happen.
everybody needs to hurry a little faster and get their data cleaned up, finalized.
But what Paula brought up is a good point of why sometimes, even if your LEA's data is ready, you finalize it, somebody else's data might affect yours. And so when that happens, you might have no choice but to do it after that. And if it's close to the deadline, then that's sometimes what has to happen. One other note on that is just making sure that you do have somebody that's available, not only on the day that you finalize and then you're gone for vacation, but there are certain times, and it happens every submission. The number of LEAs is small, but it does happen where we need to contact you, and because we found something really serious wrong in the data that's going to affect funding, or something else that's pretty critical. So in those circumstances, if we can't contact anyone at your LEA, that's just problematic. So we need somebody to be available, just worst case scenario, even after the 7th, if we need to say, hey, we noticed this, we really need you to refinalize. All right, I'm not going to go over all of these things. They're things that we remind you of pretty regularly, but just tips for a more successful submission. We've talked about some of them. Getting the data ready, even if you can't press that button yet, starting to review early is always better, especially when there's technical issues. We tend to get bogged down during that last week with those technical issues. And so we find that if you reach out to us earlier, we can provide you better help when we're not bogged down with all the major problems. Yes.
Another online question, if everyone wants to submit earlier, could we have the July deadline be earlier?
The reason that the July deadline goes until the 7th is because there are a few schools and LEAs in the state that currently their calendar runs late. And so if we don't keep that up till the 7th, then it doesn't give them any time to get their data in.
Want to say something?
Just some schools, some large districts take up for the 7th and are still wish they had more time. So not every district wants to finalize.
I will make sure that I finalize the last day.
Some of you are hiring and don't care about.
And these are general guidelines because the reason we have a deadline with the time is that you're not late if you meet that deadline. So there are reasons every year why an LEA waits till the 7th, and that's fine. It's just if we have all 158 doing it on the 7th, the system just crashes. So it's perfectly fine if you have to do it up until the 7th. But for those that have it done earlier, that's what we encourage. To answer that question from earlier, you never need our permission to finalize at any point you are ready. We certainly recommend that you use our courtesy data review to help you, but you can finalize whenever you are ready. And as Cliff said, you can refinalize as many times as you need to up until the deadline. You just have to do a new submission. All right, so quickly, the courtesy data review process we will do for every LEA, whether you request it or not. You can request it earlier if you just want to jump on it and get done with it sooner. Then we're going to be doing those this year. We're probably going to be doing those that first week in June. After that, if you want to have a second, third, fourth review, you can also request that. There's no limit on those requests. We'll send that via email, so it's just really important that we have the right contact. Sometimes there's a lot of changeover, so please let myself or anyone on the data and statistics team know if you had a change between December and July. We need to know, because otherwise we'll send that review to the wrong person. Here's an example of what that looks like. The top items are meant to be the most critical things, the things that are going to affect funding, the things that are going to affect important reporting. And so we put those on top because, again, you can review them and say, this is fine, I'm okay with this, but at least we need to know that. And so if you can respond about those items to us. The bottom items you don't need to respond about. Those are simply things that we're asking you to just look over and review. I'll send this out. I'm not going to go over them now, but these are the important, those top letter items for October, December, and then year end. We will have a training specifically in May where we go over each of these things more in depth, but just so you can start thinking about it. Again, these are those top bullet point items, the things that are critical. All fatal errors and warnings at year end, enrollment counts, membership, reading on grade level, and this is newer, but early numeracy now is in conjunction with the reading on grade level data. Reading intervention data, that's also applies to early numeracy intervention. Kindergarten type codes, incident data, SCRAM, extended school year counts, early graduates, all graduation data, and then course data as it relates to the credits earned and attempted. Yes.
It's on. It takes a second. Is there or will there be a early numeracy report like there is for reading on grade level that will show individual student data so that we can see where there's gaps or missing pieces?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know that we are adding the early numeracy counts on the school summary cumulative report for year end, and that should be done by beginning of May. But as far as like a separate report just for early numeracy, I believe what I had heard on that was we were waiting a couple years to make sure that the data quality was good, just because it's so new. We were working out SIS issues, and then it's just becoming a fatal error on that early numeracy intervention field like this submission period. So in the future, I think the goal is yes, but we don't have that right now.
We have another question. Does early numeracy data need to be added to our SIS like the reading data?
It should already be added. If it's not, yes, that needs to be submitted.
Is that a Spire question?
It depends on, and the answer is it depends on their SIS. I don't know. But yeah, that's not a new thing. We haven't made it fatal yet, but they should have been submitting it.
Oh, they need to. It's been on Aspire since it was required. So if you need help with that, please reach out to the help desk. We'll help you.
Okay, and that's all I have. So Melissa is going to be talking a little bit about the UTREC specifications. And I should ask, are there any more questions related to? Yes.
One more. When will the fatal errors start showing up for the ROGL and numeracy?
So the reading on grade level fatals have always been there, and those are only on the intervention field. And then the early numeracy will be fatal at year end for the intervention.
I think we missed one comment from chat. It asked us, if those data reviews and the data team supports were earlier, we would have more staff in the building to respond to it. I think this comments related to if they can finalize it early so that we can help them early. Is that right?
Well, it sounds like maybe getting the courtesy data review earlier would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, we can definitely look at that, moving that up. And also in those circumstances, if we say, oh, we're doing it the first week of June, again, please feel free to contact us and request an earlier review. Yes.
I think on that comment, I think they're saying people aren't in the schools to help you fix the errors. Because once May 31st hit.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably what that person does.
Okay.
I would.
Melissa's online. Right, Melissa?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Speak again.
Hello, how's this?
That's good for this room. Is it working for everyone online? I hope so. And I'll advance just to say next when you're ready.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm getting, looks like online, everybody can hear me. So hi, everybody, welcome. Thank you for allowing me to present virtually. So hopefully this works out. If something happens, it happens, but everything's been great so far. And I can see all you guys in the room as well. So that's awesome. Yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about the UTREX specifications document a little bit. I have taken over just the responsibility of making changes to the document itself. So what that means is I'll usually work with one of Erin's team members or whoever is over a certain element, and together they have the knowledge of what actually needs to be changed and the context and why we're making the change. I'm more just the busy bee making the edits on the document so that document stays to the format that we've had it at, or whatever format it needs to stick to. So I'm just the only one making the actual changes. So I've taken that as part of my new role in data privacy and data governance at the agency. Previously, I know Malia was the contact for making those sorts of changes, but we've made that change. So we just want to announce that, and that's why I'm presenting on this today. So I have a really quick presentation today. Yep, general overview. I think the next slide I have is, yeah, so general overview. I've already talked about the change in responsibilities over the document. So let's talk about where you can find it. Once again, this is a very basic training sort of thing, so I'm sure a lot of you already are familiar with the document and where you can find it. But just in case if you don't know, so one more click, please. We can see if you go to the landing page of the IT department on the USBE website, you'll see at the bottom of that welcome page, there is the Utah Transcript and Record Exchange, or UTREX link on the bottom that I've highlighted in the little blue box. And then one more click, please. That takes you to a different page of the website where that is where we house these specs specifically. So that second link on that page, highlighted in the blue box once again, is the spec itself that opens up the PDF itself. So when you get these slides, I've included a direct link to that page as well. And I would recommend actually bookmarking that page if you haven't already, just so you have quick access to the specifications. And it's also nice because we always keep the most recent version of the spec at that link. So that's just a suggestion for bookmark. For updating it, once again, I'm doing that process now. Just wanted to mention that there might be a bit of a delay from when we announce a change is going to happen with the specifications to when those changes are actually seen in the specifications. So I've gotten some questions come up because we have the monthly meeting, where oftentimes the team's bringing up, this is coming up, we're making this change in the specifications, please be aware. And then there'll be folks saying, well, I looked at the specifications, those changes aren't there yet. So it is a bit of a manual process for me to make those changes, and I make them every couple of months at least. We just finished legislative session, so there's a lot coming through right now. So I'm trying to keep up with that. I did just make a couple updates, probably less than a month ago now. So those are in the specifications, but I even just the day after I did that, I was getting, hey, this needs to be changed as well. So I apologize for the delay. Sometimes that occurs there. If you ever do have questions about if something's on my radar or not in terms of a change, I'm happy to answer questions or take questions via email anytime about those changes. But no, I just do my best to keep up with it because it is a very ever-changing document, and it's very important to you guys, as I know. Okay, so the next part, we're going to talk about the document layout and just how things are laid out in the document. If you're not familiar with it, this is a really big help, just understanding how it's set up. So here I just took a screenshot of the table of contents of the document. So each of these chapters, I'm going to call them chapters. Each of these chapters just represents a different type of record in the data collection. So you have district record, school record, student record. So that's clear enough on the table of contents, but what might not be clear from looking at this is that each of those chapters has 3 sections to it. I didn't really know this until recently, so it's not necessarily obvious. But so that first section of every single chapter is just CIF mapping. So CIF mapping is more information for programmers. It tells programmers how to program that information for that field. If you're not a programmer, you don't have to worry about this section. So you can just ignore it if it's not information that's useful for you in your role. The second section is the detailed field description. That is really, really helpful, actually. It usually is where you're going to get clear descriptions of what certain letters stand for. If you have a field that has a bunch of different letters and you're not sure what those letters are standing for, what they mean, that's where you're going to find tables that clearly say that. It often has great notes on different common questions that you might have about the field. So if you do have a question about a particular field, I would recommend checking out the field descriptions and notes first, because a lot of times questions get answered there. And yeah, that's probably one of the most helpful sections, I think. And it's one of the places I go for most of the time if I'm looking at a certain element. And then the third section it's called errors in the document itself, but we often refer to it as validations. So this section shows you different errors that you could potentially get on that field, the different validations, the different warnings you could get on that field, and why those are happening. And obviously, by knowing why they're happening, you get a good idea of how to fix them. So if you do have errors or warnings that you need more information about, that's a great place to go. So this next part, I'm calling it a demo, but really it's just asking you to open the document and check it out and just get familiar with it if you're not. So I was going to actually put a link in the chat directly to the document. So that link I just put in the chat should take you to the document. I was planning on just walking through an example. Just once again, if you're not familiar with the document, this is just really helpful. If you are familiar, just hang in with us here. So if you could please just open the document, and my example was using exit codes. So the codes you would use to identify why a student left a school system. So yeah, if you open the document and you go to, I have the page numbers noted. If you go to the student record, And then if you go to page 31, that is where you have the exit code detailed field descriptions. It has a great table that shows you what each of those exit codes stands for, like I was saying. So that's page 31. If you want to look deeper into that, page 61 has validations, and that can help you understand the different warnings and validations on the exit code. And then page 68 have I think okay. No, that's it. Okay. Yep. And another thing I just want to know is most of you probably already know this, but
Melissa?
hopefully.
So online first. Go ahead. Is it blue? Just
The question was, can you mark in the title the version date on the spec?
so that's a request. Online. Okay. Shall.
So this document is also linked on the page, but it's 4 years old. Can we either remove that link entirely or update it so it always points to the live document? One of the two, either just get rid of the link so it's not there, so it doesn't confuse people, or update it to point to the live document. That's a request. Please.
Yes.
I'll work with Melissa and get that taken care of.
Thank you.
Okay, I heard there's a link that's not accurate. I didn't quite hear that where that was, but I know
Sorry,
Cliff will
yeah.
tell me.
So for online, the question was in the data gateway, there is also a link to the specs, but it's a 4-year-old spec. Can you get that updated? And the answer is yes. They're going to work on that to get it either removed or updated. They'll figure that out.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and that's really valuable information for me because, like I
Yeah,
said, I'm
Melissa-
relatively new to this. So
Melissa, did you get the question about the version in the title itself?
yeah, I can see. Yeah, that's actually, it looks like somebody in the chat just added more information. Being able to see which version by date, if nothing else, would be helpful and eliminate the need to download to find out. Okay, yeah, just putting the date when it was last uploaded. Yeah, I can certainly do that in the next update, which is probably going to be in about a month or so, maybe less, because I'm getting multiple changes I need to make again. So yes, I will keep that in mind.
Just to clarify, it sounds like that request is to have the date in the link from the website page, not like even one step further up than actually clicking on the link and looking at the document. Is that correct?
Someone asked who asked the question?
Robert Warren. And then Stacy agreed.
We got a yes with a question mark. Ask again.
So just to clarify, it sounds like what you're asking for, Robert, isn't in you have to open the document to see the version date in the title of the document. You want it in the link before even clicking on the link. You want to know, should I even bother clicking on the link? Is it a new version compared with the one I already have it updated? Is that correct, Robert?
Yes, I'd like to be able to look at the web page and say, oh, that's the version that I have without clicking on anything. It just saves a lot of time.
Yeah, so I think right now the link just says what school year the specs are reflective.
Right, and
So
there's-
that link could just be the web person who put the link would just have to update it with the actual the accessibility date, not just the school year that it's relevant for.
Right. Something like that would be helpful. Otherwise, that it's updated every, the first of every month or whatever that is. But I know these things are fairly ad hoc. So just making it as easy so we don't have to download the document and compare which version it is. Something that makes it really clear very quickly. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Another question online. You want to read? You just start talking into it.
Bobby was asking if it would be difficult to remove the red text for the changes that were not the most recent.
So update the red text. Okay. Send that to Melissa.
Yes, that's something I've been meaning to do. It's a longer process to go through and take out red text. And I guess I'm not sure like how much to take out. If it's just the most recent changes, then maybe that's the line we want to draw, like only keep the most recent changes. I think the goal was to keep red text for about a year or so for changes that were made in the last year or so, which I already know there's older ones in there too. It's something I just need to go through and do. So I don't know if it would be for the most recent, but I definitely can update it because I know it's not up to date in terms of the red text versus the non-red text. And that's something I need to go through the document and do. So. Okay. Do we feel like everybody has their questions answered for now?
No hands here.
Okay. Nothing in the chat. So yeah, thanks everybody for the time today. Here's my email and phone. If you have any questions that come up, if I can't answer them, I'll definitely work to find somebody who can. So once again, thank you so much today, and I'll hand it off to whoever is next.
Blinking red, is that an issue? Like batteries dying? Okay. Oops.
All right, to get us started, I wanted to jump into something while it's on my mind that I wanted to share before I go into the regular PDF presentation, and that's a little bit of a heads up for people that there was a bill that was passed recently for protection of people who have been abused and gone to the courts to get added to a new membership that's protecting those both adults and students. And that this is something that it's not fully worked out yet. That's why I don't have slides for saying this is exactly what you need to do. But I would recommend going out and looking at that bill that recently passed that's going to be doing that. And it does restrict any state agency or affiliate. So every LEA, USBE, everybody, libraries, etc., from holding the address of any of these protected individuals. The current method for that to protect them is going to be that it's sending to a single address. So we'll be all required to put in the address of the Utah courts or Utah Commission on Criminal and Justice, Juvenile Justice, whichever area that falls under. That they're going to have that address that when they receive it for the individual, then they ship off any email, any packages, etc. So communications will still continue as expected for them. Good.
Do you have the bill number?
There we go. 117, HB 117. Any other questions on that? So we've got that also added in there. So again, where we're at right now, we don't have it all figured out yet, but one of the things which we'll be working on and discussing is that the bill also involves going 90 days in the past. So that would mean potentially going back and correcting things such as finalized periods and statements there that could have that address in it. And that's an area that we'll have to do additional work on, discussion, and we'll try to bring that back out here for everybody as we get that a little bit more solidified. But I'll go ahead since it doesn't seem like there's any other questions. So address data. So following along with the spec, I'm going to try to talk about some things which have changed recently that are important for things to finalize correctly. Things to know about, make sure that your data collections are going through correctly. And the first of that is the student address. That's what we used to call the address because it was singular. We would just say, this is the student's address, and we'd have the different fields for that. Student address 1, 2, state, student state, and student zip code. But those have now been replaced due to needing to have a mailing address also collected. And that mailing address needing to be collected is to be able to support different programs that the state's supporting, such as the child nutrition program. And that allows them to actually be able to contact and reach out to the students and their parents to let them know that they're eligible to be in that program and how they can be involved with it. So it has a lot of impact, and it's very important to everybody that we try to include mailing addresses when that's applicable. It is still an optional field. However, student physical address, which is the new terminology for student address, is not optional. The previous one of student address was also required, so that shouldn't be any big change for anyone. Here's some of the fine details about what you can send for an address. So first, the physical address field 1 is required. That has to be there. There's not always going to be a line 2, so that's not required. Both of those have a 100-character limit, so we're giving you a whole lot of space to be able to put in for your student's address. But we do ask that you don't put in things like not available or things like that. Do try to find those addresses, as again, they make an impact in many ways if we don't have that. Then the city also being required, physical state, and the zip code, all those also being required with the character limit shown there. So if anybody needs to come back, you could reference this, but I prefer, just like Melissa, go back to the clearinghouse specification. It's always going to be, up to date or soon to be. An area that people may not know about is that when there's a physical address that you don't actually have any street names for, we can work with that. This isn't the impossible situation. I know this came up in some previous LEA meetings before. What do we do for, say, Native American tribes down in southern Utah that don't have the same street systems that we do, or just people that live out in very, very rural areas? The Utah mailing system is perfectly fine with using these Google Plus codes. And with the Google Plus codes, you can identify any 30 square foot grid on the planet. As an example that I brought up here, this is where my desk is at the USBE. Like, not precisely, like I'm not going to say it's not the other person's desk next to me, but it can pinpoint down within a single building, like where it's at. The same technology has been used in places like India for places that have a lot of people living in small areas to where you can identify small blocks. And this works very well in Utah. Utah is one of the 2 strongest references that Google Plus codes advertises on their site. If anybody has any questions on these Plus codes, please reach out to me, or just check out the Google Plus website, go to YouTube, watch any of the videos. There's a lot of good information on there about it, and even references from people here in Utah talking about that. Any questions so far? The next area is that for a non-standard address, district of residence is still a thing. That we do still have to figure out what district they're in, and we do have an ability to do an override per an address, and that per address also works for a Google Plus code. So if you give us a Google Plus code and request for us to assign that to a district of residence, we can do that. Just reach out to us and let us know those instances, and that's not a problem. The mailing address that I brought up, the mailing addresses help us again communicate for the student's parent or guardian. If we don't have that mailing address, we can't reach out with those communications. And also specifically, if we don't have the physical address, then we're also in even less likelihood to be able to reach them. So, you know, the validity of that data is important, even though, as I said, we don't do a whole lot of restriction on that. It's 100 characters. We're not saying that it has to be able to automatically look up through our Utah GIS system, which we use specifically for like the district of residence. But, you know, we'll take whatever is put into those fields. So do your best efforts to try to keep those accurate and tied to our students to where we can help them out with those vital programs that help provide, you know, low income students meals and other associated things. Is that a question?
Yeah. He just asked if you said USPS will deliver to Google Code.
Yes, for sure. Yep, guaranteed. Does USPS guarantee the delivery to a Google code? And they do. And like I said, on like YouTube, you can go on and you can watch a whole bunch of people attesting to it about how it's worked for them here in Utah. So great reference points there. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So the most frequent Utrex errors and warnings, I'd like to just kind of touch a little bit on some of the changes which have happened, things which have confused people and that we're still getting a very high number of warnings about. And this one is the parent guardian. Parent guardian is a little bit tricky. I know there's a whole lot of texture on the screen, so I'm going to try to explain what the difference is between the two sides. This first side in red is what's new, and that's on our S1, our student record. So we're actually looking to get the parent guardian for every student in Utah. And that also helps us with those mailings, because then we're not sending it to, say, little Bobby or Sally. We're actually able to contact their parent, know their parent's name, the mail goes to them, it doesn't get delivered somewhere else on accident because there's not a known person at that address, things like that. We previously got parent guardian through the student transcript record. The student transcript record is only for, again, high school students, people who are looking to graduate, and doesn't cover the scope that we're asking for now. So please be sure to try to include that for all students, as that's now what's being requested, and this will eventually turn into a fatal error, as we 100% need to have this information to support our students. But for now, it's just a warning and will be for July. The next thing I'd like to show is something which I find very positive for, at least internally on my team and sharing out for the rest of USBE, is that we've developed what we're calling a collection progress report. And we're looking to bring this out externally for LEAs. This is a little bit of an extension of the overview, the Utrex overview, to where it can give you a little bit of like a dashboard to kind of know what's going on with your LEAs. If you're just over one LEA or multiple, it's going to be built off of the same data gateway rights, to where when you come in here, it'll restrict down to just show you what's relevant for you. As you can see here, we've got things like the completed, running, overdue, and all. If you are over more than one, those buttons are helpful. But we're currently bringing that over from the version that has all 158. And that would tell you quickly what state your LEA is in. If it's currently processing, you'll see yourself under the running. If you do all, of course, you'll be there no matter what. And completed, you'll be in that or the overdue. If you want to get a copy of that, you can reach out with the buttons below the copy where it puts it into your clipboard, CSV, PDF, print, all those options are right there available. If you do have a long list that you work with and support, then you can use the search box on the side there to let you narrow that down to only show relevant to that. So again, if you put in Summit and you're over a few of the Summit LEAs, then you're going to see a couple results show up. It's going to narrow it down to just those ones for you, or as you add in more details, it will continue to narrow down. Is there a question that popped up? Oh, okay. Thought I saw it. In addition to that section, we also have these broke out to show errors. And this is going to be, we feel at least very hopeful on our side, and we're hoping will be useful for the LEAs for doing their finalizations. Again, this is in support with the overview, but this is essentially going to be able to help you know what your counts are. If you go to the overview, you download your file, you're going to see potentially, you know, hundreds of different results in a fatal list. But the breakdown of those results aren't really shown to you. You don't know how many you're working with, how many are left, how many to communicate internally as you're trying to resolve those. This will give you those counts for each of the error codes on a uniqueness level. So in the first example there, we've got must be present LEA number on incident record. And then on the next one down, we've got with school number. It's still the same error code, but because it's distinct, we're actually giving that in a separate, distinct manner for people to be able to identify how they need to be fixed. As the resolution is going to actually be based on the message and not always one-to-one with the error code. And this will also help you communicate back to the data and statistics team during your reviews of what you're working on and where to put your focus, because you can see how many are happening for each. And they're also going to have all this access to, so it gives us a common page to go to other than the documentation that they're going to send out for you. And we've also got in here some filtering on this to where you can sort based off what you would like. Each of these different areas have a easy sort feature where if you wanted to sort by the count or the message or the type level, which would be the fatal 1 or fatal 2 or warning 1, warning 2, those all are there available for you. Or if you really want to just digest the data as an analyst, you can just punch in the CSV button, kick it out, and you can digest it however you would like, and you'll get the full plot. Go ahead, Craig. Is Craig looking to speak? I see it says raised hand. Do I need to allow that? How will this work with USIMS? That's a great question, but that's a question that will have to come through as USIMS is looking to absorb the collections. When they do, they'll probably have their own means of doing the same thing, but it will probably be more through the API flavor, to my understanding. So API responses will try to give you all these errors. But I would also say, reach out to Mark Laudups or Katrina Brinkley to ask your direct USIMS questions. They're better fit to answer those. All right, so again, these pages will be limited to just your LEAs. So just again, so that you're aware, it's not going to be exposing other LEAs information. It'll be protected, and you don't have to worry that everyone else is going to see your dirty laundry of how many errors you have. There's a second tab here on this, group by error, and that we're actually going to not expose the other LEA's dirty laundry, but we're gonna also let you know if you're alone with the problem. So if you're the only LEA that has a problem, you're gonna be able to see, say, on error code S2618, that you are not alone. There are 17 LEAs which are actually having that problem. If you happen to be over 17 LEAs and you see all of that, then you can say, well, maybe it's my SIS. Maybe it is all within my scope. But if you're, for instance, getting the AM 907 error, there's only one LEA that's getting that one. So you can know that it's at least unique for you. It's not happening with your other LEAs that are on the same SIS as you. So there's some helpfulness there that can also help you communicate with your SIS to be able to get things fixed and how big of a scope it is. And that's why it's such a great tool for us as a state to look at and evaluate as we're finalizing, because we can see if it's an isolated experience or if it's something we can try to help with in bulk. The next thing I have, unless there was any questions, is the data gateway. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that being red, as that's what it's been for a very, very long time. But that is now changing. We're bringing the USB color schema to being the blue that matches along with the USBE blues, which we have for our public websites. And this is intended to make it more clear when there's a problem on the page. When you have something show up in red, you typically feel it as being incorrect or wrong. We already had those things still on the data gateway where we'd have red text that comes up. Now you're going to be able to see that red text come up distinctly. You're going to see where there's a problem, if there's a problem with any of your areas, because that red will stick out for you. It won't be like the similar text that's around it. And that change is expected to roll out for everybody next week. So if you want to remember the USB red, go ahead and take your screenshots now, but we'll be getting out of that pretty quick. To help people with this transition, we're also going to be adding in this little module box, which is going to be up on the top, that has the data gateway has changed its color scheme to match USBE blue. If you still see remnants of the previous red color scheme, please clear your cache to view the latest changes. So that has been identified by my team so far, is that you do have to clear your cache, or you might be living with that red for a bit longer. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Is the red okay?
The charger.
Okay.
They don't need that.
Nice.
Thank you. All right. We're changing from red to blue. If that didn't get your blood going, you guys are just programmers. All right, we're just gonna go, this is again, some basic training now on the administration of data gateway. So this is LEA admin roles. Most of you have that role. If you already know everything about that, and if you want to come up and do the presentation instead of me. Okay, I'm just gonna say you can, because you guys do this as much as I do. Okay, go ahead, next slide. Just want to talk a little bit, and this is just kind of a refresher, but help you understand again how the current data gateway is set up and administered. So basically, when you have access, the state level basically has access to everything inside of there, and it filters down to the LEA and it filters down to the school. This is for this common utilization. So just all user accounts need to be associated with an institution. If a person's account expires, and then gets deleted, it goes into limbo, it's not limbo, it's just an account, it's still there. I know you've run into this situation. How do you fix that? On your level, currently in the data gateway, you can't. It's simply because you're down at the LA level, it has to be asked at the state. And that's okay to ask the question, hey, can you unblock these accounts? Absolutely, that's what we're doing for you right now. Email myself, I'm a little bit harder to get to sometimes, but I get to them. Nicole, Stephanie, the help desk will take care of it. Now, if you're gonna send me at the beginning of the school year a list of 100, which I do get, send them, we'll get them. We just do, but don't feel bad. What I'm saying is, this is just what happens, and this is the current system we're working with it. Question? Yes. As we transition into USIMS, he's like, we're not going to change. There is no plan at the moment to radically upgrade the data gateway, as we're expecting lots of these user interface components to be consumed inside of USIMS. So that's why. We talked about like 2-3 years ago, we're like, hey, we're going to do these, and then USIMS kind of took over. So that's why we're not just saying, well, let's just update data gateway for everything. It's like, okay, we've got this other huge project coming online. So great question. Answers, yeah, ish. Solid over
Do you
there.
prefer us to put a ticket in or just emails?
So the question is, do you prefer a ticket or email? Whatever you want. Tickets get answered really quick. Emails, depends on who it hits. Like, for example, I'm not answering emails right now. Why? I don't know. Keep it longer. Yeah, it just, it depends, right? Tickets do get answered fairly quick. You do that, and they can take care of it. An email works just as well. It works, day-to-day basis. If we see those come through, we can usually, we can get those fixed running super fast. So. Roles are permission levels for school level filters. You're aware of this. Each account can have one or more assignments. So a couple questions. See, Mommy wants to know, I didn't read it fast enough.
If Cactus will be included in use.
Will Cactus be included in USIMS?
Yes, the educator team is working on Cactus subsumption right after they have 2 priorities in front of it, and then they'll be working on that.
Yeah, so will be called Cactus inside the USIMS? I have no idea.
No, it will
No,
not.
it's gonna be called something else, so.
It will be called USIMS.
USIMS, the educator component, so great question. Was there another one, or are we good? Okay.
When?
When? Oh, she didn't shout loud enough. Tomorrow, no, okay, they're in the process of working, it's just, they're working through it, fairly soon though.
Yes, so if I remember correctly, and Tim Davis is the product owner for the educator team. So he owns prioritization, but if I remember correctly, we have, we're doing some production stabilization and then associate level licensure and then Cactus consumption thereafter.
So 3 days, okay, just kidding. They're working through progress. For years. It's coming. They're just sharing with the meeting that we had yesterday with you, since I said at the beginning, again, in the prior meeting, in case you didn't hear it. Yesterday was fantastic. I walked out of that with all kinds of enthusiasm, and it's like things are looking good, because there's other days where I've been with Katrina and we're like, no, things are not looking good. Yesterday was fantastic. So, okay. And I just want to mention again, an association of an account can be tied to multiple places. Sometimes you guys might run into that and says, hey, I've got a teacher in my school who's also got like an assignment or working in another school. We can tie those accounts if we need to. You can create another email account at the other place and have 2 different logins, or we can make them a single login, whatever. However we want to approach that. We're flexible, so I'm just letting you know that's a possibility. Okay, go ahead, next slide. Okay, this is just kind of orient you again to the administration of the data gateway. Go ahead and hit that first button if you don't mind. Okay, so as you go inside of there, when you look at an individual's role, so this is my testing role. When you're on that user account, again, for those who are online, sorry, you can look at me. I think you can see me online. You've got the individual's name, their address, their associated LEA levels. There could be multiples. Cactus ID if it's inside of there, and then when you look at these associated levels, just so you can see, okay, I can see one over here that's tied to Weber, and then this one down here is also to a school. There are different ways that you can configure the individual's account according to your processes, your policies of what you want an individual to have access to. So just want to make sure and call that out as you're looking over here on this side saying, what are the associations which you can remove? If you unlink this one, I don't know if you can. You can try and then see what happens. Then you have to call me. I don't know. I do this at the state level and I move things back and forth. I don't know if they can do that. Paula, do you know? Someone try and associate yourself and see what happens. No, you can't. Okay, maybe that's a state level thing that we have to do for you, but just know that we can have multiple associations in there. Okay, go ahead, next button. Okay, and so as we look at this, then just the application permission of the individual, what do they have access to look at when you're looking at their account? That's where you see this. You can either click on the overall or you can look at by institution and it breaks it down. So for this example, this account, it's kind of weird, but it's just an example where they have the Utrecht Association at the LEA level. Maybe they're doing some work where they have the student locator in place, but then they also at just one school within the system have access to the assessments in there and the Utrecht component and accredited, they look that stuff up. Just know that's where you would go and look if you're not familiar with it. Go ahead and hit the next slide. Okay. Oh, I just can't point it at. Hit the next one. Yes. Okay. The last part, just wanted to call out your attention. Most of you know this, but if you need to change the row or add to the row, one of the easiest ways to do this is just click on add the user role. Now, again, I'm looking at this at the individual login view, not at the permission view, which is a little bit different in the roles. I don't know how you guys like to do it. I'm just showing you this is one way that we go through it. If you click on that, you can add the role. Go ahead, next slide.
Not wanting to go anywhere.
Is it not moving? You broke it. Good. Is there any way to see access on each roles? Sometimes people say I make this, but what's the question?
They have to guess which role. People would say like, I need access to keep, but then the admin. I mean, I feel the same.
I'll answer that question in a little bit. Is it not advancing?
No, it's not even going backward.
Kill it. There we go. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. Anyway, also to remove a row, you click on just the removal. Go ahead, try next. It's coming.
There we go.
Okay. I think this is going to answer the question that came out. How do I see or go through and change up their access? Maybe I don't want to limit, or how do I see?
Well, they want to know specifically what are the access under each role, so you don't have to guess by adding a role. Like, is there some master?
Yes. Okay, that's a great question. I don't know if it's my slide presentation. The way you do it is on the roles. You actually click on the roles and it says permission. You click on it, it opens it all up and says this is what this default role has. Now I'm going to show you how to limit or just like make your own selection. And this is, some of you use this, some of you don't, but I'll show you how to do it. Basically, it's the new default roles. No, this is something different. Sorry, reverse. Teaching something else. From time to time, updates and new releases to the data gateway become available for all LEAs to use. Often these new functionalities and permissions need to be initialized before the LEA can access these new functionalities. You've seen this before, right? Some of you absolutely, some are like, huh? Okay. To initialize the new permissions, the LEA admin needs to go log into the data gateway and select the accounts from the toolbar. Go ahead and hit the next one. Basically, as you start going into the roles, you're going to see a warning box up on top that's going to say initialize the default roles. If you have a new school that's come online, or new permissions or whatever has become available within the data gateway and your people can't get access to it, it's like, why isn't this working? Well, you have to initialize it. I'll come back to that question. Okay, go ahead and hit next. Again, that's where the default roles at. Once you click on that, go ahead and move to the next slide. It's going to tell you basically, hey, we're initializing the roles. This is what it is. So in this case right here, there's some online schools that haven't been initialized. So what happens is you just go through there, see what that is. It might be new permissions. Like for example, if something new happens, if Cliff pushes that out and it needs to be initialized, you just click on it, and it'll tell you, hey, this is a new functionality. Go ahead, click the next button. It's just kind of going through what are these roles, permissions, and example. Next button. That's how you activate it. There's a red button. It's probably going to go blue. Maybe. I don't know. That's it yet. Then click on it. That activates it. The LEA defines roles. And again, I'll go back to the question that's online in just a moment. LEA defined roles, and LEA can create an LEA specific roles. To initialize new roles, the LEA admins need to log in the data gateway and select accounts from the toolbar, select the roles from the options available link, go to the green create role option. Go ahead and click next. Go ahead and hit next, and the arrow will say, let's say, for example, the LEA admins going in and working on some stuff and they need to do some additional work. Hit next. Oh, wait, I'm talking about something else. Sorry. Quick little just updates. Most of your LEA admin, you should have access to everything inside of there automatically. But because the data gateway is now 10 years old, some things don't automatically pop in there. You might need to add. Just realize that's why we're upgrading to USBE. It's one of the issues. When you see an account that has manager on it, that individual who has access to that can also work with you to create and assign roles within the limit of whatever that manager position is called. So for this example, the assessment LEA account manager can give permissions to other people within your LEA. They don't need to bother you to do that. They can help you out along the way. If it says user, go ahead and press next. The user has the access to see that information. The manager doesn't have access to see the information. It's a role. So if you assign a manager and the manager says, well, I have access as manager, how come I can't see the assessment stuff? The answer is, well, give yourself the assessment user permissions. Just understand that kind of nuanced difference between that. Go ahead, next slide. If you need to create a unique role for your LEA, example, keep, that's kind of a popular one that you see a lot of people do. That's where the button's at. This is green one on top. Go ahead and click on next. It pops open this dialog box that says, well, where is this role going to exist? Is this an LEA level or is this a school level role? You select the one that you want. Go ahead and hit next. This example is going to be a school level. It goes in and says, okay, for what schools? Now, this is the default setting that you can go through. You can select all. Go ahead and hit the next arrow button. You have to give it its name. Hit the next arrow button. You can either select schools that you want this access for. You can click all. You go through to the permissions that are available. Open up the ones, go ahead and click next one. This one says keep. It creates this account that's gonna have a little star. And when you have that star, you will know that that is an LEA level created account, put it in it next. And that's going to be created and you can start assigning that a roll out. Now, if you ask the LEA, if you ask the state, hey, how come I can't see this, for example, this keep that's not being defined? It's like, well, we didn't create that, you did. You specialize that access. You can do whatever you want. I've seen people go in there and say, this is what I want my school administrator, so you call it that. And you say, I want them to have this permissions. I've seen registers have certain permissions that you drop inside of there. Keep is a common one. Just know that it's something that you can do. I think this is my last slide. Go forward one. One more. Okay, go back twice. Okay, just making sure we're on that. Okay, make sure, this is just a refresher, make sure you're maintaining your security. Make sure when you give access that you're careful, that you're limiting the access to those who need to know the information. There's no problem with sharing the information for those who need to know, but it shouldn't be just a carpet. We give everyone all access to the data gateway and Utrex. I would recommend that. Unless there's one like you, if you're like a small charter school and you do everything, okay, that makes sense, then you're the LEA admin. But just know that your responsibility and your policies within your LEA are based upon what access does someone need to know. Make sure you can follow that as you move through it. Okay, next slide. Again, the LEA admin creates and manages all accounts for the LEA. The LEA Utrex user can view data and reports, including Utrex validation errors for all schools, school level. You can also set that up where you have this Utrex school level user. You also have the restricted school user who does not see those validations inside of it. These are just options that you can work with. Now, let's go back to the online question. Yeah, got it. I got it. Like,
The original question was, is there any like master way to see the access to each role? That way you don't have to just assign it.
hit back arrow. Hit the back arrow a couple times. One more time, maybe 3 more times. Okay, so on this slide, how can I see what the permissions are in a single shot? If you hover over the permissions, it will tell you what those roles are for that given defined permission. Hoping that answers the question. If you want to give access to multiple people at one time, you click on the actual name of it, you get another dialog box, you can add people into it. You can add multiple people at one time. Is that the only question?
Are you looking at two-factor authentication?
Are we looking at two-factor authentication? Not for the data gateway. Maybe in USIMs will work, but good question. We talked about it in the past to set it up. We're not there. Hey, any other questions? Question back.
So manager role, is it possible to get a couple more added?
Oh yeah, you can add as many as you want.
No, I'm
Oh.
like, so that I'm not the only one that gives out. Most common question role we get out is locator, not a locator manager, so I'm the only one that gives out. I might tell you that part.
Send an email to me and Cliff.
Okay.
And we'll see. How soon do you need it? Like,
It would just be nice if like,
Whenever.
Russ is our only one, he's retiring. It'd be nice for one of us to learn,
okay,
or if he's gone on vacation for a week or two, there's no one to do what he does. So there should always be a backup person.
I agree. Usually there's 2 LEA admins, but you can definitely request it.
Yeah.
There you go.
I didn't like that.
Yes, you can have more than one LEA admin. So that's another solution. You have to request it. We don't just hand those out. Do you have a form for it? That you, Paula has a form if you want more than one in there. Paula's your person. And you contact her and say, add those in. So yeah, we can solve that problem. If you actually do, so would you need,
Yes, I don't want them to be able to, yeah. But I do want another, yeah.
okay, if you want a new LEA admin, email Paula, the individual that you want, and they're, basically you just need their email account or whatever the data gateway account, which should be their email. And then if you want us to look about doing a new manager level, send that email to myself, but take care of that. Okay, question or answer?
Are there instructions for all this free roles and stuff?
Right here, PowerPoint. Are there instructions? They're changing the color on me next week. And it's like, there are instructions, and we actually will be going through and doing some update on the training documents, and we'll make those available in another meeting. Questions? Okay, Katie. Oh, she's on the plane.
Is she?
I'm here.
All right.
Who's driving?
I am, I think.
Okay, there's lots of like buildings in the slide, so we'll see how that goes. Hi, everyone. I wish I could be there. It's always fun to see people in person, but I had a bunch of meetings that I had to be at today. So my name's Katie Chalice. I'm the new Director of Privacy for the Utah State Board of Education. It used to be David Soleil, and then before that it was Whitney Phillips. So that's me. Next slide, please. So 4 things that we're going to just zoom through before lunch at noon. First is the concept of balancing data privacy and security with usability. Second, I'm going to give you some information about student SIS passwords. I realize that many of you in attendance may not have your fingers in that pot, but I thought maybe you could kind of nudge someone who does. And then we'll just have a brief comment about employee access and employee use. Okay, next slide. And then again. So when it comes to data privacy and security, there's this constant balance between how private and secure you keep data and the usability. So go ahead and click forward twice, Erin. In the diagram on the left, you can see that if you have a whole lot of, if your data privacy and security is really, really strong, the usability is lessened. That goes directly into the comment that was just made about it would be nice to have more than one data gateway manager. Privacy would say, no, only one. But usability says, yeah, you should have, 2 or as many as you need. In contrast, if you try to go too heavily on the usability side, then that can be a real compromise to data privacy and security. Good example of this would be giving everyone full access, everyone in your LEA full access to the data gateway. So the next few slides, we're going to be kind of looking at that balance. All right, next slide, Erin. And then again. All right, so when it comes to student SIS passwords, I'm going to kind of refer to this balancing act again. So the strongest and most secure passwords you could have for students to log into their SIS would be passwords that are really long. They're unpredictable, so no one else in the school or community could guess them. They're unique and they're known only to the student. In contrast, Erin, if you don't mind, the most usable passwords are short, especially for the little ones. Based on a formula. This is what I think a lot of schools and districts are doing is they have like a formula to generate the passwords and usernames for their students. It's also easier for usability if it's the same password for all students. So it's like your school acronym is the login for the computer for everyone, no matter who's signing in. It's also more usable if it's known by all staff. So you guys are in this spot where you're constantly having to like battle or balance between these two. And then Erin, if you'll click forward again. So a couple things that we, and I'll just say that like, we don't have like strong guidance for you aside from these kind of 3 points that I'll give you here. It really is up to you to kind of determine like the risk that you're willing to take in favor of usability. The goal of schools is to educate kids. So I don't think that data privacy and security should get in the way of that. But you might want to just kind of reevaluate your password formula just to make sure that it is a really good balance. So one thing to keep in mind is that with a password, you're protecting against two threats. One is external malicious, attackers, but the other is internal, which is usually students, and students can be real stinkers and mean. So keep that in mind. And then Erin, if you can click forward twice. So one thing that this is a strong do not. So no matter what you decide to use for your password formula or whatever, you should never, I know it's easier, but you should never post that on websites. UETN does audits, security audits for LEAs. And that's one thing that they find a lot is that in an effort to be useful, especially to parents, some LEAs are posting information on their website. So they might say like, oh, hey parents, this is how you can get the username and password for such and such program. I know that's helpful, but it's strongly discouraged. And then also please make sure you're never using the same identifier in both the username and the password. So like if you use the student number for the username essentially for SIS, your SIS, which I think is kind of the default for Aspire, then the password should not also contain the student number. It should be different identifiers. All right, next one. And you can click through, I think probably 4 times. Yeah, okay, whoops. All right, when it comes to employee access, so similarly, the goal is to educate kids. And it does make it harder to take care of kids when you are restricted in your access. When it comes to your SIS especially, that is like your body of data that is the most comprehensive and contains some of the most sensitive information. So if there's ever a place to kind of be cautious, it's with your SIS. So when you have access that's highly restricted, it diminishes usability. When you grant lots of user access, then it increases usability, but decreases privacy and security. So you'll need to kind of consider that balance. One thing that we strongly recommend is utilizing role-based permissions to the extent that you can in your SIS. I know, for example, hopefully you're in the practice of giving like a school principal different access than a classroom teacher versus like a district administrator. And then also one thing that's really important is to make sure that your LEA has policies on quickly offboarding employees when they leave, or even if they just change positions. So if you have a school principal that goes to a district position, you should be in the habit of restricting that principal's access. In the district position, they no longer need that level of access to the data in their school. And IT staff, this is especially common. All right, and the very last thing that there's no compromises on. FERPA is really clear on this, and Erin, you can click forward twice, I think. There are many cases in education where you need to grant broad access. Perfect example of this is teachers need access to their student information system for all of their students. However, the use of that data is not necessarily always appropriate. So just a reminder that anytime you're accessing student data, it should be only if you have a legitimate educational interest, never if you're just curious, never if you want to just see if your daughter's boyfriend is getting in trouble in school. That would be a highly inappropriate use of your access. Checking to see if, there's a student that kind of drives you crazy and you want to see like if he has siblings coming up later in school or whatever. Like anytime that it's for curiosity purposes, that's not an appropriate use. So just kind of, that's a reminder for yourself, but also just for other staff. And then the last slide is just information about our team. So there's me, John. I think a lot of you guys probably know John. You heard from Melissa a little bit earlier, and Nicole obviously is there with you. And then we're in the process of hiring someone to fill another position. If you have any questions for us anytime, please just contact us at privacy@schools.utah.gov. We love to help. We love interfacing with LEAs. We respect and admire you guys and love you and want to help out any way we can. The end.
Thank you. The end of meeting part 2. We start back again at 1:10. Lunch break. Thank you, everyone.
No.